Hi, welcome to a special remote broadcast featuring State Representative Alyson Sullivan. These remote broadcasts have become vital to getting information out on various different levels. We're fortunate to be able to speak remotely with the representative to kind of get things as an update, not only on the state level, but also in her community and the communities that she serves in the 7th Plymouth district, which would be Abington, East Bridgewater, and Whitman. Representative, how are you doing on this day, knowing we are at a point that we initially saw the governor have discussions about closing schools until the first week of April. Now the latest conversation is pushing it back to early May.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a hard decision to make. The governor, it's going to be a hard job for him. This is something that nobody could have prepared themselves for. It's such a fluid situation. It's constantly changing. It's not something that's changing by the week or by the day. It's changing by the hour, and something that we're doing what we can do to get information out to the public, also work within our colleagues in the House and the Senate and with the administration to make the best decisions for the constituents here in the Commonwealth.
What are you hearing from your constituents? What are their concerns in regards to this ongoing pandemic? These are, and it's a word that everybody's saying, unprecedented times.
Right.
What are you hearing from the residents?
I'm hearing a bunch of different things. I think people are very concerned about what's going on, the unknown, the scary factor of what's going to happen. When are we going to get back to normal? What is normal going to look like when we do be able to get back to a sense of normalcy? There's also the concerns for the students and the kids in the community on going back to school, if they're going to be able to go back to school this school year. There's also concerns about our small businesses, and it's something that is not falling on deaf ears. I think everyone's concerned on the backbones of our community, and that is our small businesses, our students, and our younger generation. We're worried about our seniors and making sure that they're protected during all of this. I mean, there's no one that's safe in the sense from the COVID-19 in regards to potentially getting exposed. So it's making sure we have resources available, tests available. We want to make sure we have the PPE equipment for our first responders, people that are on the front lines, but also people that potentially might be exposed, because we want to limit the exposure of the COVID-19. Sorry if you're hearing things, I tried to turn it off. We're still getting used to this whole video conferencing.
Well, the thing to keep in mind also is that you're somebody who represents the people, and I'm sure people are reaching out to maybe Curtis, who you work in conjunction with as your aide up at the State House. He's a valuable asset to your office. What are you hearing from maybe local officials? Not only concerns about assistance, but let's not forget, we are at that time of year where folks are preparing their budgets for the new fiscal year. We're talking about elections, town elections.
Right.
What are you hearing from them, and what are you hearing on the state level in regards to any pushing back of any of these activities until the curve is flattened?
So I know that there's been the talk around the town's the ability to push back town meeting, or having town meeting look slightly different than it normally does outside of the pandemic. We also have talks of, as far as giving the towns the ability to push back their town election and not to go through those normal loopholes that they necessarily would have to go through in order to do so. I mean, this is something, like I said before, is such a fluid situation. So, East Bridgewater has their town election typically, I believe it's the second Saturday in April. Abington sees, the last Saturday in April. So those elections would be coming up fairly quickly. And with the shutdown, it's kind of impossible. And when you look at the polling sites, it's usually our senior population that loves to volunteer during our polling sites. And we can't expose them to something like this, because what I'm also hearing is that there are people that are infected that don't even have symptoms or signs of any type of exposure. So it's almost that, silent factor as well, which we need to be concerned about.
Yeah, there's definitely a scary factor to this, as to this virus it can sustain and live on different surfaces. We heard the governor actually, I think he actually pushed off any plastic bag bans and has actually asked folks not to use the reusable. And it's kind of unusual because in my community, I'm sure Abington was on the cusp
Yep.
of enforcing a plastic bag ban. I think the Board of Health has just actually pushed it back in for the foreseeable future. But this is something that everybody was kind of getting acclimated to go away from single-use plastic bags. Now, the things that you're becoming accustomed to, you now have to put aside for the time being because they could be a carrier of COVID-19.
Right. And that's it. I mean, we're looking at other options. I know that certain grocery stores in Abington switched over to the paper bags. And, we pushed back not only just the plastic bag ban, but also the driver's licensing and, different requirements that we had in place that, unfortunately, with the times that we're in, we're not able to meet. So we have to understand that there's some barriers that we're facing because of the fact of the pandemic in front of us.
I know you are a big fan of small businesses. You and I have joked multiple times on multiple media outlets. I've always been a fan of every time you would take a video or shoot pictures at various breakfast eateries or restaurants.
Right.
What's your feeling? What have you heard from the folks in the business community as to being able to sustain? I've talked with local business owners, and some say they're going to try to do the best they can to switch over to be takeout and
Mhm.
offer curbside. Others are like, we don't know if we can do this.
I have to give great props to those small businesses who have been able to switch it over within hours and to be able to go from a dine-in restaurant with no sense of takeout and no sense of a drive-through type of restaurant, and now fitting the needs of what we're dealing with. I've been able to kind of visit a few of the small businesses throughout the community, also with the ability to have that social distancing, but just to check in on those small business owners because they are the backbone of our community. And I do worry for them. And I know that they are very fearful, not just for themselves and for their business, but for also their employees who were, such loyal employees for so many years. And now the fear of, are they going to be able to take care of their own families, as well as, are they going to be able to come back to work once this is all done, or are they going to find another job somewhere else to have, that financial stability? It's a struggle, but they're doing a great job, and I commend my, firefighters, police, departments in the district who have made it a point to go to those local businesses and order out and bring it back into, whether it be the fire department or the police department, and support them and our community. I mean, our community has rallied behind these small businesses, and you see constantly on social media of people ordering to go at certain restaurants, especially the ones that are the dine-in restaurants typically. So it's great.
If I could ask you, is what has it been like the past week up at the State House? What are some of the discussions that you're hearing with your colleagues, or you're hearing coming out of the governor's office? Again, we touched upon it earlier in the conversation about pushing back school, returning to school till May. What else are you hearing for initiative or things that state government is looking to do to help the communities in the Commonwealth?
There's several bills that have been filed. I actually filed one myself as far as price gouging and to stop price gouging on different items, especially the hot topic
Toilet
items.
paper.
Right, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, alcohol. I mean, it's just crazy to think that these items are just nowhere to be found. And you can go into a store and they're charging upwards of $20 to $30 for, a couple rolls of toilet paper. So, I understand there's a high demand for certain things, but we also need to be mindful that there's a lot of people out of work right now and that need these necessities. We also are talking about our first responders and people that are on the front lines in regards to sick time and covering their sick time if they are exposed to the COVID-19. Some other legislation we're looking at, whether it needs to be a legislation priority or if it needs to be an executive order in regards to our tax deadline, and to make sure that, trying to fight to be aligned with the federal deadline and push our tax deadline back, so that people, especially in the CPA world that, usually would have this time to prepare for the tax deadline in April, not having that ability, the same ability. just like you and I are doing right now with the Zoom, it's pretty much how I'm communicating with my colleagues, either through Zoom or right through the cell phone, through the text messages and group chats and what have you, to be able to communicate. We're taking this very seriously in the sense of having that social distance, but also continuing the work within the State House itself. So some of my committee meetings have been on a Zoom outlet, and to be able to kind of discuss the needs of our communities. I just had one with mental health and discussing the homelessness and the issues around, like so personal to myself is domestic violence, and what are we doing for people that are now quarantined to their homes with potential abusers and assailants. So you don't think of things that you typically would think of in a situation that we're in, and we're just kind of thinking of everyone and trying to figure out what the best case and the best turns to make.
If there's something that we haven't mentioned during our past conversation during this special segment, what would you want to make sure that we do touch upon before we say goodbye, at least for this segment?
Yeah, of course. I encourage everyone, if they have social media, to follow my page. And it's not necessarily to get more followers, but in the sense that we're putting as much information as we can and as much information as we get on my Facebook page. And it's State Representative Alyson Sullivan. We continuously update it with the numbers of cases that are being tested, who have been positive, and the number of deaths. We just got word that there's, as far as couple hours ago, 25 deaths total in the state of Massachusetts. So it's a number that is climbing day to day, and it changes hour to hour. So we update those numbers on a daily basis, and we update any other press releases that get released from the governor's office, from the State House, anything that we feel as though is important for our constituents to know. We have broadcasted every time the governor is going to be on a press conference with updates around the COVID-19. We've also shared the hotline number, which is the 211 number. We shared the virtual town halls to help with people with unemployment cases. We've also shared contact information for both Curtis and I. And like you said, Curtis is a true hero in this situation, and he's been a great advocate for people with their unemployment cases, and making sure we're coordinating with our liaison on getting those cases handled and pushed through to make sure people are getting their unemployment payments. So I just want to make sure that people are getting as much information as possible. And Kevin, when you do share this video, if you can also include, my State House email along with Curtis's, and it's very simple to find but easy to remember. It's just Alyson.Sullivan@mahouse.gov, and then Curtis is curtis.boucher@mahouse.gov. But I can definitely share the text with you.
Probably the last thing that I would ask you is just over your shoulder behind you is this fantastic picture. You and your grandfather, knowing that this virus could have affects folks who are over a certain age.
Yes.
How important is it for us to reach out and do well-being checks with our senior population? Maybe even if you're somebody who's at home, nothing to do, maybe writing a card or helping out the folks at the Council on Aging, whether it's in Abington, Whitman, or East Bridgewater.
I think it's important to check on everybody, because mental health is such a huge issue, especially in times like this. So whether it be a senior or someone younger. But my grandfather, in this picture behind me, 93 years old, and thankfully he lives with my mom and dad. So when I do FaceTime my mom and dad, I actually get to see my grandfather as well. I FaceTime my uncle today, who was with my grandfather. So not that I don't want to go see him, and not that I have any signs of the COVID-19, but just being out in the public, I don't want to, expose him to anything. And I've been keeping my distance, which is very, very hard for me, because I grew up with him in the in-law in my parents' house. So, but it's important. It's important to either send a text message, a phone call, a FaceTime, whatever it is that you have access to. Or even, I like to see on the news where the young grandchildren are going up to the grandparents and at the window and just waving through the window. I think it's important that we remember, isolation can do a lot to people's minds, especially the older generation as well.
We've been speaking with State Representative Alyson Sullivan. She represents the 7th Plymouth District. Representative, we want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin.
You got it. And again, we want to thank you and remind you, we will try to do these on a regular basis when we have the availability with some of our elected officials or some of our leaders in the communities that we serve. And if there's a message, there's something that you want to make sure that we get out there, whether it's if you have extra food, you can drop it off at a food pantry, give blood, or do well-being checks, please do so. Again, you have been watching a very special segment, a remote segment. Thank you for watching.